Welcome to the latest episode of Lockdown with Kayla and Taylor. With cybersecurity encompassing so many facets of business, it can be overwhelming and stressful. With our help, you'll be able to make sense of it all. And this week, we are discussing how to create a solid cybersecurity roadmap as a first-time security lead. Or perhaps you've been a security lead for a while and you're moving into a new industry and a new role where you need some assistance. So,
That that's huge. First time security leaders, that's scary. Yeah. I, where do you begin? We talk about being leaders, and oftentimes we talk about the soft skills required or the management skills required of doing one-on-ones and doing peer reviews or downward reviews and upward reviews. But whenever you become a cybersecurity leader or a security leader within an organization, like you're stepping into so many facets that affect the business. Obviously, you've stepped into quite a few roles and different parts of security and ownership of teams. Where do you really begin? How do you begin to identify like the needs of your team compared to the needs of the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're actually going to cover stakeholder management in a future episode, which that is a huge part of building a cybersecurity roadmap. So I'm going to put that piece to the side for right now. But I would say firstly is you need to understand your organization's objectives. And that's where the stakeholder management comes in. You need to go in, you need to meet with people, but review websites, look at the goals and objectives, look at the OKRs, KPIs, talk to your stakeholders and understand, what their overall goal is and how they are using that to align to the objectives from the board. What is the overall mission? Identify how cybersecurity fits into all of these components of your company, whether it's sales, customer success, marketing, product security. The overall sentiment that I see is that security is a cost center. They have their own priorities, their own goals. They're not trying to address my specific needs. So if you can go in and understand what each team is doing and what the risks are, then you're better aligned to the overall organization, and you're going to have much more success getting buy-in for the things you need to do if you talk to people and understand how you can help them versus force things on them. And then with that, I think as you're having those discussions and you're doing your own homework and you're reading websites and white papers and things, assessing the current state. What do you see is missing? What do you see as lacking? Look at existing policies, procedures, practices. Build a SWOT, understand the strengths and weaknesses, your opportunities. This again, I know I'm super biased, but this is where GRC skill set comes in handy, being able to assess the risk of the things that aren't there. The unknown unknowns is a skill set. So I think that's super important as well. And that helps you to identify your key assets, those key risks, and understanding what's the most critical to the company. Where are the keys to the kingdom? And are they protected? I think that's huge. You have to know that.
They're hidden, usually under the mat at the front door. So you talked about understanding objectives and assessing current state, identifying key assets and risks, going into the unknown and establishing the known. As like a new security leader, are you coming in with a predetermined notion that you know how things should be going because you've either been an operator, you've been in the industry for a while, or are you allowing like your assessment of the current state and the known objectives and other things to establish where you're going to start your roadmap?
I think it'll be a little bit of both, because as a practitioner and as a strategic thinker, you're always going, but this has happened before. This risk has come to fruition. That's always going to sit in the back of your mind. It's never going to turn off. But you have to be open-minded in the sense that what worked at one company in one industry may not work somewhere else. For example, moving from financial services, a very highly regulated and disciplined industry, into SaaS, the way you did business at a financial services company will never translate one for one into what you'll do to address the same type of risk in a SaaS company. So you have to be willing to have discussions to you have to be able to say it and admit it, right? I can't have that approach because It's not the same. But I think that also goes with like the next step in building your roadmap is understanding the legal and compliance landscape, understanding your contractual obligations, which are also part of the legal landscape. What if you already committed to customers and partners and
Are you
where,
saying
where,
are you saying sales sold something?
what? That never happened. Understanding that landscape and what is permissible and not in the type of industry and company that you're in is very important as you build your assessment and your roadmap.
Yeah, and I think that I'm obviously I've both been in security for a very long time. Different parts of security too, right?
Mhm.
Like I've
Yeah.
done endpoint, I've done attack surface management, I've done threat intelligence, external attack surface management,
Yes.
SIMon, UEBA, and then I've still within the security realm, but more
Yeah.
focus on defense tech as of recently.
Right.
And in the way that I operated as a support engineer or technical account manager, focused on endpoint security compared to the way that I operate within the defense tech realm.
Mhm.
I had preconceived notions of this is how I prioritize, or this is how I escalate things that I see of importance. While the foundations appear to be the same, there are nuances in how you
Yeah.
execute.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the nuances of execution is really where the stakeholder management skills come in because there's going to be a lot of compromise and back and forth and hearts and mind campaign that goes into having a successful roadmap. When I say successful, like bought into and supported across the company, having that consensus is going to be important.
Yeah.
And
So we've talked about GRC. Of course, I would actually like to know if we've had a single episode where some portion of GRC hasn't come up yet. I think we should research that.
yeah, I think we should. I don't think so, but that's
Yeah.
the point. GRC is everywhere.
So we've assessed the current state. We've talked about identifying key assets. We've talked about compliance requirements and regulatory compliance. Sales sold something, right? And we have contractual obligations. How do we then prioritize? We
Well,
know the objectives.
yeah,
How do we
that's it.
prioritize?
That's it right there is knowing your objectives, setting those goals and objectives. So when I've done this in the past, I have set OKRs. I prefer to go in that route. That's objectives and key results if you're not familiar with OKRs. So for example, I think one very common OKR is going to be the objective of evolved security culture. I think every single CISO I've ever spoken to has had that like remit, right? Within your first 30, 60, 90 days, work on this. So that's the objective. So the key result could be execute comprehensive security awareness training, achieving 75% of completion or 100% of completion by a certain date.
Yep.
And then what's your criteria for completion? Who are your dependencies? Have you met that goal by that date? Begin a CISO publication from an awareness perspective, like a blog, internal blog for awareness by the end of whatever quarter, establish your criteria for completion, dependencies, blah, 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 right? So go through and like look at your objectives. Other ones I've seen are develop and coordinate a security risk management framework, ensure timely reviews of customer due diligence, same thing with vendor due diligence and making sure your stakeholders there are aligned, securing your business applications, securing your corporate assets, provide excellent customer service, right? So these are the objectives that you need to start looking at as a CISO or a security leader in any function that you deliver a service for.
Yep.
And really hold yourself to them. Get buy-in from the rest of your team. Make sure that the objectives align to everything that's there. And then you'll look at those and say, okay, what's the company's mission statement here? How do I align to the company's already existing roadmap? Maybe it's vendor due diligence because there's been a vendor related incident in the past, or maybe it's customer delight and focusing on the customer aspect. And then prioritize things under there. Now, when it comes to tools and prioritization, this is, I think, a big question, right? I don't have this budget, right? Like the Gartners and the Palo Altos and the Wakefields and the Forresters are all saying, I need to have a SIEM, an XDR. I need to have all these really expensive tools like ticketing systems, software management, hardware management for asset inventories. I need to have vulnerability management. I can't afford this. How do I prioritize it? Take a deep breath and go back through your assessments and see what have you experienced as lacking, completely missing or lacking. And then what is your budget? What's your pool? Everyone, if you're a security professional and you're a leader, you should know what this pool is. And then sit there and say, okay, what's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck? Is it a system, a platform system that is massive, that you can have HR in there and change management, IT management, security, GRC, procurement? If you don't have buy-in from stakeholders, do not go in that direction, because then you're going to be disappointed when nobody else buys in and you're left with a $1 million tool that is only quarter utilized. But look at what you have. Have you had incidents in the past that have had very bad repercussions for your brand, where you would have benefited from having a SIEM or vulnerability management tool and process in place? What's going to make the company start to trust the security function? What's going to help build trust with your customers or your prospects, partners, the industry? And then have those discussions. Say, hey, here's my draft roadmap. This is where I think we'll get the biggest bang for our buck. We'll be able to really enhance our security posture and the security maturity of the organization, and build those things in, build the OKRs or KPIs in, or how you're going to be able to demonstrate that to those stakeholders, whether it's a steering committee or the board or just the executive team. You owe that to them to be able to show the value add, because security is not a cost center. And that is how we start to deliver value.
I think that's huge. Oftentimes though, we start to talk about the cost of things and we only discuss the procurement cost.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can say, hey, there's an open source tool for this, right? We need endpoint metrics. There's OS Query. OS Query is free open source tool.
Yep.
There's open source SIEMs. There's, open source data collection tools. What we often don't account for when we're starting to talk about roadmaps and deliverables is, what is the actual internal cost of delivery?
Absolutely.
Is there infrastructure that needs to be provided? Is there other team resources that need to be provided? And that does go back to the buy-in and the understanding and aligning to roadmaps and objectives. But every time we talk about this, it's about changing the security culture.
Absolutely. That's one of the first OKRs that I establish, is working on evolving the culture. Even if you've been in business for years, if the organization has not historically paid attention to security or had a CISO or security leader or whatever the title may be, they like, oh yeah, we sit behind a VPN, we're fine. We have MFA, we're fine. No, that culture has to change. That is not gonna cut it today. And you're absolutely right that stakeholder management, the security awareness, the security culture, it all fits in, and your roadmap should be reflective of the things you need and all encompassing. My 3-year strategy is people, process, and technology. And I go through, and I'm a bit overboard. I was a project manager, so I have a lot of stuff in there, but
Your PMP is showing.
I don't have a PMP, just a master's. I'm gonna put that out there with a disclaimer.
Sorry.
No, because a PMP is really hard, and those people deserve a lot of credit for it. So I just want to put that out there. I do not have one, but what I do have is a particular set of skills that I've honed over time. Like in my roadmap, I have A, B, C. I prioritize what I need, and then that will change. The document is a living document that will change over time, because if there's an incident, everybody's objectives change. If you get a new customer that has more stringent requirements that then are going to impact shared infrastructure somewhere, your objectives and your goals are going to change. So you have to be able to pivot. Again, favorite word. Pivot. And that's really where having a roadmap that you can easily say, okay, I was planning on doing this in Q1. Something's happened. I have to push this out. I have to move something else up in people. Maybe I have to hire people, or maybe I have to hire people and bring in new technology and then train the people on the new technology from a process perspective. Now I'm hitting all 3 areas, and having that level of transparency is really important to make sure that you're still aligned to the goals and objectives of the organization.
So with your roadmap, and I find that I don't like roadmaps. like
Mhm.
generally, just because at times, like the way that roadmaps are presented, it gives you a stringency of this is how I'm going to execute, and this is the only way I'm going to execute. And it almost sets a precedence of nothing else is important outside of this delivery confined to this roadmap, right? I know that that's an inaccurate, unfair evaluation of
Well,
roadmaps.
I think a roadmap should not talk about execution of how. Full stop. Your roadmap should say what needs to get done, not how it's going to get done. So if you have a roadmap that says, I need a ticketing system, it should never say what that ticketing system is, because you should be getting together with all of your stakeholders as part of your project kickoff and saying the objective of this project is to identify a ticketing solution that's going to work across the organization within the implementation timelines that we agree. And then you should, as a group, work together to identify a ticketing system that meets all needs. Because maybe it's just an IT ticketing system or a security team ticketing system, but then HR all of a sudden wants tickets, legal wants tickets, they can track their work. You need to make sure that the criteria that meets their needs is met as well. So I don't think a security team, unless it's their own tool, should force any tool on any stakeholders at all. It should be a group decision. Consensus should be made, because that's how you burn bridges. You can't force things on teams, because what if it doesn't work the way that those teams work? And now you're forcing a change that is not necessary.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I've come across that not just specific to security, but like
Yeah.
implementation of an LMS system where
Uh,
it
Nightmare.
you start talking about like internal training or onboarding of an employee within a certain department,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden it's, oh, if we're gonna onboard employees there, like maybe we should publish our security awareness training there. It's, oh, okay. And then it's, oh, this doesn't work here, but this works here. And then HR is like, oh, if you guys are going to do training and employee onboarding here, maybe we should do like general onboarding here. And you're like, wow, like
But
big
that's
blend.
scope creep. That's scope creep. And that's where you need to bring all of your stakeholders together and have I know you're laughing because I know there's an example that's in your head right now of where this has happened somewhere. I've seen it happen lots of times where we tried to roll out an IAM tool, had every single stakeholder on board, had a kickoff call, we had a charter, we had why do we need to do this slides. We did all of our homework, and then the one of the key stakeholders decided to change all of their cost center structure and put that from the finance team into the HRIS system, which then broke every single thing that was built in the IAM tool. And then, oh, it's the tool's fault. No, it's not. You made it an unapproved change. You didn't come back to the project team and talk about this. You didn't involve the right stakeholders. So that I think is a discussion for the stakeholder management conversation. But you're absolutely right. There, you need to make sure that you have consensus. But consensus and buy-in does not mean that the resources are going to be available when you need them to be, which is why I have a little table next to every part of my roadmap that has Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, for 3 years going out, highlighted, and then in my description of each of those projects, initiatives, if you will, I say who I need, who's agreed to have their resources available. Do things change? Absolutely. Priorities are going to shift in the other functions. Pivot, but that's when everybody needs to get back together and say, okay, we need to have governance over this process. This is what this is. When are these resources going to be available? Or do we bring in a third party to do it for us, like the PS hours and things like that, professional services? Or is this no longer a priority? So if that's no longer a priority, these are all the things that are going to be impacted by this change. Hey, CEO, hey, steering committee, hey, board, are you okay with this change? If not, we need to do something about it. If you are, cool, put it in writing. I want an email, and done. Move to the next.
So I know that we're short on time here. I guess I have one last question for you. Whenever we talk about building roadmaps, having security road modifying, gaining buy-in, all of the things, right? Is the security roadmap intended to be viewed by all employees? Should they be aware?
I think they should be aware of high level Yes, of where it's going. Do they need to know funding resources and
No.
and like, budget information and approval information? Absolutely not. That should be really locked down just to the security team. And if you're sitting inside an engineering team, like just the engineering leaders who can see that, or a product team. When I worked for the CTO, the product team they could go and look at my roadmap whenever they wanted. Did they? I don't know, but it was there. But
It
my
exists.
teams, it existed. And then what we would do is my teams, when we got to get together quarterly and review all the initiatives tied back to those objectives, complete, incomplete at the end of the quarter. If they were incomplete, why? Was it a dependency issue with vendor, internal system limitation? Work on a remediation for that. Get approval amongst us for when we were going to have a new due date and track it from that perspective and celebrate the wins. Get a
Yes.
list of all of your completions and say, woohoo, we did this thing, we finished. And especially in our field, can feel so good having a completion for something. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important that you communicate within your teams. You're all collaboratively held accountable,
Yeah.
working collaboratively, held accountable, and then celebrating those deliverables and milestones and completions when appropriate.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I am a firm believer in violent transparency. So not even just the wins, but sometimes the lessons learned,
Yes,
because
that's absolutely.
it can impact such a microcosm of it can have such a microcosmic effect on an individual contributor in the way that
Yes.
they are approaching things and potentially impacting that roadmap that they weren't
Yeah,
aware of. So I am all for violent transparency. I
I agree.
agree that there are things that, yes, funding, resourcing plans, engagement with outside consultants, especially like if you're doing some shadow IT stuff, you're doing some pen testing or you're doing
Yep.
static code analysis. There are things that obviously don't need to be violently transparent. But when we have those wins or we have those adjustments or those lessons learned, I'm all for it.
Yeah, completely
Um,
agree with you. I completely agree. And I think the lessons learned, if you see that you have, and this will be my final word, I swear I'll stop. But if you see that there's a particular function or individual who is consistently blocking what you're trying to do, and you have the evidence, have a conversation with their line manager or your peer, someone that you're comfortable with, and say, how do we fix this? How do we work collaboratively and move past this stuff? Is this person overtaxed? Are they not skilled? Are they unaware? Is there a misalignment? And then deal with it that way as well.
100%. Kayla, I really appreciate your time. I know that we got a lot of episodes lined up with some really awesome guests. So I can't wait. This has been a great episode, and I think it's
Yes.
really eye-opening. So I appreciate your time today, and we will talk soon.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.